Chapter 756, Grand Mass. After waiting nearly 10 minutes outside the prayer hall, Klein and the other believers who were here to join the moon mass entered under the priest's lead. In the dark and serene atmosphere, they heard uniform and ethereal chanting. Full-faced above the land stood the crimson moon. And sweet it was to dream of themselves, of child and wife and parents, but evermore. Holy and rhythmic voices echoed in the prayer hall as the believers involuntarily quietened down, as though they had forgotten all their frustrations in life or the different challenges they faced in the real world. Under the guidance of a few priests, they found their seats. In front of the altar, Bishop Electra, who was in charge of celebrating the Mass, held the revelation of Evernight and began preaching. As this segment came to an end, the priests held up water and bread, and they began handing them out to Klein and company. This was the loving grace of Evernight, food that people both alive and dead could share. Having not had dinner, Klein naturally didn't waste the bread of average quality and the water in the cup. Then, he saw candles light up on the altar, and under the darkness, they appeared like stars in the night sky, emitting light and warmth that eased one's heart. At that moment, Bishop Electra led the few priests and everyone in the choir to chant in unison. We look upward into the night sky. We tenderly say her name, Evernight Goddess. We know no other words except Evernight Goddess. May the goddess draw out from the angel chorus, with the silence sweet to gather, and hold both within her right hand which is gentle. Goddess, if she heard us, she would surely agree, smiling with purity at the dead. Come, rest and sleep well, my children. The empty voice filled with holiness drilled into every believer's ears. It felt as though all the spirits present were resonating in unison. As a sequence 5B yonder, Klein felt as though his soul body was being cleansed as his spirituality naturally flowed out in comfort. Following that, a tranquil darkness seemed to appear before his eyes, a darkness without any sound. In the darkness, corpses lay there, their faces calm and at peace, as though they weren't dead and were actually in a deep sleep. Klein calmly traversed the darkness in a staid manner when he suddenly stopped and looked diagonally ahead. At a spot where moonflowers were silently blooming, there were a few people sleeping. They were the hatless Dunn Smith in a trench coat, old Neil, who still wore his black classic robe, and the short Kenley, who worked hard to save up money. They closed their eyes in a relaxed manner as a faint smile appeared to show on their lips. Around them were erected tombs, each of them having the same word written on them, Guardian. Klein instantly closed his eyes as a holy and ethereal voice resounded by his ears. Cross your hands humbly over your breast, make the silent prayer, and shout from the bottom of your heart. The only escape is tranquility. Klein lowered his head, closed his eyes, and raised his hands up before crossing them before his chest. He then repeated silently, "The only escape is tranquility. The only escape is tranquility." This repeated again and again until the prayer hall reached a state of extreme silence. Only then did Klein open his eyes again and rubbed the corners of his eyes. He slowly exhaled and glanced around him. With the light from the candles, he discovered that most of the believers were covered in tears without realizing it. Even his valet, Richardson, was constantly tearing up without wiping his tears. The moon mass is akin to a ritual with beyonder powers involved. Its effect is likely to make everyone's spirit resonate, allowing different people to see the deceased who they share deep relationships in the darkness. It relieves one's grief in order to obtain tranquility. Yes, this isn't an abnormality that's targeted at beyonders, so I can be at ease. To ordinary people, this might be an illusory outlet that's instantaneous. They would only believe that it's a result of the goddess's greatness and not some extraordinary powers. Sequence 5 Beyonders of the Evernight pathway seemed to gain a significant enhancement in their control of spirits. Klein withdrew his gaze as he made a judgment. Right on the heels of that, he recalled the darkness and the deceased that lay amidst the moonflowers. Closing his eyes, Klein allowed his thoughts to drift. That dark plain filled with moonflowers, night vanilla, and slumber flowers is a manifestation of the goddess's divine kingdom. What does the source of danger in the nighttime, inside that battle of the gods' ruin correspond to then? Klein gradually outlined the cold darkness and the fog that enveloped the sea on the eastern front of the Sanya Sea. In the fog, there was an ancient, pitch-black cathedral with a steeple. Ravens spiraled above it as though they were holding a memorial or were in grief, and around the cathedral were ordinary residents, simple wood huts, grayish-white mills, and indistinct figures. Logically speaking, this foggy scene that's intricately tied to the night and dreams should be formed from the aura left behind when the goddess slayed Annihilation demonic wolf. But it doesn't have any similarities with the corresponding divine kingdom. Yes, mortals can't pry into the secrets of deities, so perhaps the dark plains filled with flowers isn't the projection of the divine kingdom, but rather an outcome of the ritual. Seeing that the moon mass was coming to an end, Klein reached into his inner pocket and took out his wallet. Holding his wallet, he got up and entered the aisle, walked straight to the altar, and under Bishop Electra's compassionate watch, he walked diagonally over to the donation box. He tapped his chest 4 times in a clockwise fashion, drawing out the crimson moon before throwing in all his large denomination notes. A total of 300 pounds. At that moment, Klein didn't feel the pinch like the previous few times. He was in a very calm mood because he recalled the ritual old Neil had used to repay his debt. Back then, they picked up a wallet containing 300 pounds, all thanks to the goddess's blessings. Taking a step back, he drew the crimson moon once again, and he gave his spot to the donor behind him. At that moment, Bishop Electra walked over and said as he drew the crimson moon, "May the goddess bless you. May the goddess know about it. What I wish for now is to receive some teachings," Klein replied with a smile. Bishop Electra glanced at the prayer hall's side door and said, "If you don't mind waiting 15 minutes, I can explain the Bible to you in the library." "I would love that," Klein said with a warm smile. Bishop Electra immediately got a priest to lead Dwayne Dance and his servant out the prayer hall through a side door as they circled around a spiral staircase to the nearby library. There was a huge bookshelf here, and on it were various books from the Church of the Evernight Goddess. There were tables and chairs lining the sides for priests and bishops to study and preach to the believers. 12 minutes later, Bishop Electra entered the library with a calming smile and saw Dwayne Dance with his white sideburns standing in front of a bookshelf, flipping through a book with great focus. He exuded the vibes of a scholar. "What are you reading?" he asked with a smile. Klein snapped the book together and said with a self-deprecating smile, "The Revelation of Evernight." To be frank, although I'm a pious believer of the goddess, I've never had the time to seriously sit down and read the Bible due to my busy life. As he spoke, he didn't show any odd signs on his face, but he felt uneasy deep down. He was afraid the goddess would smite him with a bolt of lightning to reward this pious believer, Dwayne Dance. Well, lightning isn't in the goddess's domain. Klein consoled himself. Bishop Electra smiled and took the Revelation of Evernight from his hands. It's never too late to begin. Following that, he invited Dwayne Dance to sit down beside a table and systematically introduced the Revelation of Evernight's structure and the corresponding holy word. Richardson held his employer's hat and cane, and he stood a slight distance away, silently waiting to listen to the bishop's preachings. Time ticked by when Klein, who appeared serious, suddenly felt his spiritual perception trigger. A scene outside the door naturally surfaced in his mind. This was an intuitive foresight that stemmed from a clown, one that had been enhanced by the gray fog. Outside the door, an elder dressed in a black clergyman robe walked by and headed for the nearby spiral staircase. He had lush white hair but didn't comb it, making him look rather disheveled. He had a thin face that made it appear as though he was bones wrapped in skin. He exuded a rather cold bearing, and his skin was abnormally pale. His eyes were a rare pure black. This figure quickly vanished from the door as the footsteps gradually sounded, like they were coming from above. "A keeper, but it's not the one I met at the prayer hall. It's his turn today." Klein paid attention to Bishop Electra as he wore a contemplative look over the Bible's contents. He wasn't surprised that a keeper would appear inside the cathedral and pass by the library at this time. This was because the sealing forces behind Channy's gate would reach its peak at night. It wasn't suitable for living creatures to remain inside. Therefore, The keepers only entered at sunrise and left at sunset. It had just turned dark. I need to remember what day and date it is today. Later, with more information, I'll be able to figure out the keeper's rotation schedule. This way, I'll be able to act as the corresponding target at the right time. Klein reined in his thoughts as he listened attentively. Finally, he got up and bade farewell 30 minutes later. He smiled and said to Bishop Electra, "I'm wondering if I have the honor to listen to your preachings in the future." "No problem." Faced with a tycoon who had just donated 300 pounds, Bishop Electra couldn't reject him. He even happily nodded. "As long as you come to the cathedral and I have the time." Klein didn't harp on the details to prevent any suspicion. He earnestly thanked him and left St. Samuel Cathedral with Richardson. He returned home before 8 and enjoyed dinner as he leisurely spent the rest of his night. Late at night, inside the master bedroom, the sleeping Klein suddenly opened his eyes. His spiritual intuition told him that someone had infiltrated his mansion. Adapted from The Lotos Eaters by Tennyson. Adapted from The Cry of the Children by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Adapted from The Bridge of Sighs by Thomas Hood and Lotos Eaters by Tennyson.